Thanks so much for coming to the session here on cold storage. I had a good time talking to some of you while I had an opportunity before we got started here, just while you were getting settled. We're going to talk about everything focused on mastering cold storage. So if you want to store vegetables, meat, cheese, anything at a colder temperature, this is the place to be right now. My name is Regier. I'll introduce myself in a bit because you're probably thinking, oh, this guy sounds a little bit different than me. Where's this guy from? You probably don't recognize me because I've traveled quite a ways to get here. I'm all the way from Saskatoon, Saskatchewan in Canada, down here to Hardison Mill, so about 3,000 miles are behind me right now. And I'm just loving the welcome here. It feels like, I've never been to Tennessee before, but it feels like, thank you. It feels like home, and I'm so glad that my first impression is going to be all of the homesteaders of this state. So thank you for setting a high bar, I guess, for my Tennessee mindset. I guess when I go home, I can tell all my friends that everyone in Tennessee wants to start a homestead, and it's going to be great. So thanks. Back home, just as a quick introduction, my wife is here somewhere. She's back there waving. We left our two girls at home, so we're kind of overwhelmed with a bit of guilt right now, but also extreme elation. Feeling really good. My feet have just been lighter the last couple of days. I don't know if that's it or not. But yeah. Just a quick recap of my last 20 years and how I came to be on this stage in front of you. I started my professional career as a high school teacher, taught mainly science, like the logic kind of stuff, as you'll see later in the presentation. And I got really hooked on growing food because I got passionate about sustainable living, learning about science and ecology and stuff, and realized that a really fun way to connect with my students was to grow food with them and teach them about sustainable living. And that passion for food developed into eventually a career transition that led me to start an urban farm in my city of Saskatoon. So that's a city of about 300,000 people. I just kind of reclaimed urban land and grew as many vegetables as I could and delivered those vegetables to people in my community, like boxes of this every week throughout the summer. And basically, to give you an idea of what I did, was took land like this, full of weeds, and turned it into spaces like this. Abandoned backyards like this that no one wanted. This is our next door neighbor. Turned it into this. And even public boulevards. Our city has a public boulevard guidelines to allow you to use your public space in your city to grow food. So I took advantage of that and turned this boulevard into this. This is just across the street from our house. So I don't own any of this land, but yet I was able to make a living growing food and giving it to people in my community. So I really drove in the deep end there after leaving my teaching career to start farming. But then I realized since all of my food is in front of people, it's right in the middle of the city, so people are walking by all the time. They're asking me questions all the time. So like they're walking by saying, how come my plants don't look this good? What are you doing to your plants? How come the pests aren't eating or the insects aren't eating your broccoli? My broccoli are decimated. So I get questions like that and realize there's this huge gap between what a market gardener has learned by trial and error and what the average home grower has learned. So being a teacher in the past, I thought, well, it's time to branch out now and combine these two worlds, the farming and teaching. And I started something called the Vegetable Academy. So I'm online now. You might have come across the Vegetable Academy website. I make some videos from time to time, but most of my passion and my time goes into helping my seed-to-table course students, where I've packaged all this up to teach people how to do this step by step. So yeah, there's a quick introduction about how I came to be here in front of you today. As a resource, I've got for you today a handout that's going to have a lot of the notes, so you don't have to worry about taking too many notes. I'll give you my email at the end of this, and you can just send me an email, and I'll email this to you. And I've got some examples of this handout in front of me on the stage here, too. It has two major sections. One is on building the structure of a cold room, and the second major section is organizing your storage zone so you're equipped to store different types of food, specifically vegetables. I don't get into the meat or the cheese, that's not my specialty, but I can answer all of your questions about vegetables. So our agenda looks like this, but lists are kind of boring, so I'm going to tell this more like a story of how like one man's quest to have a sustainable supply of carrots, because that was really my drive. But in my brain, this is what's happening. We got a list of 5 big lessons that I'm going to share with you today about cold storage. And the story looks like this. It starts with carrot dependence on this side. I told you I was a teacher when I started getting interested in food sustainability and self-sufficiency. But as a teacher, I was going back and forth between work, spending my time emailing, not enough time growing food. So after work, I'd have to stop at the grocery store all the time and spend my money there buying carrots. And the carrots didn't taste like they did when I was growing up. I was lucky to grow up with a family that had a backyard garden, but this was not the same. I'd followed the North American dream, got a job, a career and everything, but my food supply was ruined. I had no food security. I was spending all my money on this thing that I thought I could grow myself. I knew I could grow myself, but I wasn't prepared. I didn't know what to do. So that was my major driver that got me down this road to food security and wanting to be able to store a year-round supply of carrots. Even just like might have just been happy of all I had with carrots. Now I have everything, all the vegetables, but carrots was the main driver. They're just so crispy. Okay, so the cold storage benefit, first benefit that this is probably one of the ones that most of you are thinking. If I have a cold storage facility, I can start then eating things in the off season. That's the biggest perk. But I'm going to share 2 more perks with you. So that's the first perk. I'm a happy camper now because I've got my carrots in the main season, and then the rest of the year I can still eat my carrots. But in the process of working with this cold storage room that we have now, I learned there are other benefits as well. An awesome benefit is that I can hold perishable products for short periods. Even just this one little gain, being able to hold a head of broccoli for 2 weeks or 4 weeks instead of just 3 days on your counter or 2 days before it's soft, that makes a huge difference to my workflow as a homesteader. Now I can plant batches of broccoli, harvest them all at once, put them in the cooler, deal with them progressively over the next couple of weeks, and not see all this hard work that I put into my growing just literally dehydrate itself on my counter without cold storage. So as an example here, when I start harvesting in batches, I also can, it's just a really small quarter-sized bed in our kitchen garden area, just harvesting a bunch of beets all at once. I think what gets glamorized on YouTube or internet anywhere is just going out to your garden, the joy of going out to your garden to harvest 1 or 2 things, 1 or 2 beets, 1 or 2 carrots, like a handful of lettuce, and coming in with this beautiful basket to put on your counter and then make this lovely salad for supper. But the reality of our homestead life is, well, while we want to do that, our kids are pulling at our pants. We've got swimming lessons to get ready for. There's not enough time for that, and we end up grabbing something really quick without having time to go out to the garden. But if we batch harvest stuff like this, we can just pull from our cold space already, and all this work is already done, so we end up eating way more vegetables. I'm getting ahead of myself because that was the next point I want to make. What I like about this batch harvesting that's being demonstrated here is that when I empty out my garden space all in one go, like harvesting just that little bunch of beets there, now I'm immediately clearing more space in my yard to plant the next crop. If I just grab one of those beets the first week, and then 2 weeks later I grab an oversized beet, and 3 weeks later another beet, I've lost the 3 weeks of growing space, or the growing time that I could have been spending with this next crop of cabbage that's following the beets in this case. So by harvesting in bunches and storing them, getting that valued produce into my cooler, I can maximize my growing space as well. This next point is about flexible preservation work. So here I'm harvesting peas. This is my normal work rate. This is how I made a living growing and selling peas. Peas are not very profitable, but if you can pick this fast, it's profitable. No, but at the end of this, I'm going to end up with a bucket of peas. And 3 days later, I'm going to have to pick another bucket of peas. 3 days later, another bucket of peas. They're not just going to give you all their peas at the same time. But really, if I think about the kind of preservation work I want to do, when it comes time to blanching or shelling and blanching these peas to get them into the freezer for the winter, I'd really like to just do that all at once. I don't want to have to do some on Tuesday, then I got to do it again Thursday, and then Saturday again. It's just annoying. But if I get all these buckets, throw them in the cooler. Even sometimes our kids like to shell, so if we've got a bit of time in the evening, hey, let's shell some peas tonight, and then we'll even keep the shelled peas in our cooler. They can stay another couple weeks before we actually blanch all the peas together. So that delay, that flexibility in terms of timing is an amazing privilege that comes with cold storage. Okay, and then the last benefit is to conveniently access produce for meal preparation. So I touched on this a little bit when I was talking about the beets. So yeah, I mentioned our family does not, if we're gonna try to eat a salad every day for supper, we're not gonna do it if we have to go outside and grab that salad every single day. But if it's just pulling a salad out of our fridge because it's already harvested in one batch, then we're gonna do it. We're gonna grab a big handful because it's already clean, it's already cold, it's already gonna last 4 weeks. Salad doesn't last just a week like the stuff that you get from the grocery store. When you grow it yourself and get it into cool temperatures fast, you can get it lasting for 4 weeks. So hopefully that expanded your mind a little bit into how you could use cold storage for vegetables. I know there are other reasons as well that you might be here for storing. So I'm curious, just from the conversations I had with some of you earlier, some were here for storing meat. So how many are in that category? Storing just hanging meat, need a cold temperature, whether you're butchering any time of the year. Yes, that would allow you to butcher any month of the year. How many are here for vegetable storage? Just classic. Cheese? Wine, perhaps? Brewing? Fermenting? Okay, did I miss anything? Okay, so that's the general mix there. Okay, thanks. Okay, so I had that motivation, you've got yours. Mine was started with carrots, now let's get into the building. First step on our little journey towards carrot independence. Now, I was surprised this happened again today, but when I was talking to some people, and when I often talk about storing food through the winter, this kind of image gets conjured up in our discussion. It's just the image of a pit. People talk about digging holes. Or my grandma used to dig a hole, or there used to be a pit like this under our basement, and we used to go down there and grab potatoes any time of the year. And I think this did used to happen by necessity because there wasn't technology that we have today. So I'm not going to encourage you to do this, because along with those stories, if you dig deeper, you'll also find that there was a lot of food spoilage that went along with this. So I'm going to encourage you to take your treasured vegetables and put them somewhere where you can really control the conditions. Because we don't want to avoid, or we do want to avoid the freezing. There's a loss of crop right there. Or warmer temperatures. If we allow our pit to get too warm, then we're just basically holding a compost pile of rotting food in our cold room. So when I think cold room, I think this: clean, organized, temperature controlled. This is what's going to give you the long-term results that you can count on, and that you, quite frankly, would deserve after you put in the hard work of growing all this food. Treat yourself to something like this that's going to preserve that value. It's like, this is your bank. Hey, there's your, yeah, that's a big deal. Okay, so building your cold room. First thing, the decision you're going to come up against is choosing a location. So here's a visual. It's totally going to depend on your property. It could be A, B, C, or D. A and B are inside your house. We chose a location like this. This is our basement. On the left nook there seemed like a perfect fit for our cold room because it was surrounded by 3 concrete walls. The earth around it is pretty cold, so it was just kind of a tidy place to tuck our cold room. There was only one really well insulated wall that I needed between the warm living space inside and the cold room that was insulated in that little nook. But in doing so, I sacrificed a bit of convenience. Like, our stairs are on this side, so we have to walk a little bit further to get to that nook. But in our case, the overall efficiency and everything, the priorities balanced out here. And the priorities that I'm talking about are the ease of build. So I want my cooler to be easy to build. I want convenient access and efficient operation. Those are really the 3 things that it's going to come down to, no matter where you're building. If you want to build an outbuilding, like option C there, a different shed, something excluded from your house, that's totally possible. If you want to put this on a trailer and move it around, take it hunting with you, bring it home, that's possible too. So in the handout, I've got some decision maker tools that will help you kind of prioritize which option might be the best for you there. Construction methods are pretty straightforward, but I want to highlight a couple of things in the construction method section here. We're not going to talk about too many details because there's an organization or business called CoolBot that makes a controller to control a cold room like this. And you can find on their website these 3 good case studies. One of a DIY shed, like an excluded building, just in how they put it together step by step. DIY walk-in cooler in a basement, and a mobile cooler trailer. So I'm going to spend time today telling you the things that aren't on the internet already. But you can find those just with a quick Google. So our cold room started 10 years ago, before I started teaching about this stuff. So I don't have a lot of, these are my 3 photos of my entire construction process. So I did some Google SketchUp stuff to help you imagine what I did with our cooler. So there's that nook I mentioned. Started with bare concrete walls. I screwed rigid insulation, XPS, extruded polystyrene insulation to the walls and the floor. And between those joists, they had bad insulation as well. Just built laid plywood on the floor that just floats on the insulation. And wood stud walls, pretty standard construction methods there. Filled those studs with insulation and wrapped the whole thing with another layer of rigid insulation to stop any thermal bridging, and then put on surface materials. In our case, we used some plywood and painted it white. Could be drywall, anything that you want to use for your finished material at this point. On the inside of the cooler, there's the outside, just a door. It's a custom door because our basement is short and it couldn't fit a full-size door, but the easiest thing would be to just grab an exterior door that already has insulation in it and install that in your cooler. I'm touching an air conditioner, which we'll talk about later as one of the options for cooling your room. And on the inside is just painted walls, clean room with shelves, got some lights that are automatic. They just turn on when I open the door. Great feature because you're always going into your cold room with a box full of things. So simple. And again, I'll remind you there are those resources available for you if you want to check out more details about how to build those rooms. But I want to spend more time on the common mistakes that you can make that could really screw up a room like this, because it's not like building a regular house. The one major mistake you can make is by skimping on the R value. R value is the calculation of insulation's ability to resist heat flow or heat transfer. So our pink area is the insulation area, and if it has a high R value, it's going to stop that warm energy from transferring to the cold side. Now that we know the R value is important, well, what R value is something that we should shoot for? How big? Or how high? So I made a theoretical cold room with an online heat loss calculator. I made a cold room that had roughly our dimensions, 8 feet by 6 feet by 7 feet. And then I ran a bunch of numbers. I tested it with R5 insulation, R10, R15, R20, all the way up to R40 to see what the difference would be in terms of how much energy it would take to heat this place, or to cool it, sorry. And then I set the temperature for the inside of the cold room as 39 degrees Fahrenheit, and imagine that the surrounding area would be 70 degrees Fahrenheit, like room temperature. And those numbers show us R5, this is on the left here, is the rate of heat transfer, the number of watts, the amount of energy that is taking to cool this space constantly. So if I just use R5 insulation, that's 1 inch of rigid foam. If I just use R5, I'm using 550 watts constantly. I need to remove that amount of energy from my room constantly. And you see, what I like about this graph is you see how the immediate gain for those first couple of upgrades in insulation. If I go from R5 to R10, I almost half my energy costs. If I go to R10 to R15, I get a substantial gain still. But if you look further along the graph, once you get to R40, there's not much difference between R35 and R40. So if you're going to shell out the big bucks and go all the way to R40, well, you're probably not going to have a huge financial gain or benefit in terms of energy efficiency if you go all the way to R40. But go at least to R20. If you see, that's kind of the part where it starts to level off. And I still wish that I had added more insulation to ours, because the benefit of insulation is lifetime. You add it once, it doesn't break. It keeps making your system more efficient forever. So spend a bit more on insulation, make it work for the long run. Another mistake is that you could have thermal bridging. You could insulate your room really well and use wood studs and fill the gaps of those wood studs, like this gentleman's doing here. He's filling the gaps between his studs with insulation. And even if those studs are really thick, like 2x6s or 2x8s, there's still a flaw in that system, and that is the thermal bridging. If you pointed a thermal camera at a home, you would see that if it wasn't done properly, you'd see all the heat wicking out where all the studs are, showing that there's a lot more heat loss happening where those studs are, and windows obviously in this case too. We want to avoid that, and it's really simple. It's just a matter of putting at least an inch or two of rigid foam on the outside of your studs or the inside, but somewhere in your building details so that you don't allow that thermal bridging. Condensation is the last potential problem that we can cause unknowingly. There's moisture in the air all around us all the time, even though we can't see it. And when the air cools, like if any of you have had a cold drink today, you would have noticed some moisture accumulating on the outside of that drink. That moisture didn't travel through the glass magically. No, it came from the air around the glass. It just cooled enough so that the water in the air condensed into a liquid. It turned from a gas to a liquid, and then it became visible, and we could see that liquid accumulate on our glass. It doesn't happen with the cookies, though. Why doesn't it happen with the cookies? They're not cold. There's no temperature change. If the hot air encounters the cold glass, it condenses into a liquid. If the hot air encounters the warm cookies, it doesn't matter. It just stays in its gaseous form. So why is this a big deal? Well, we've got some hot and cold issues in our cold room, and we could potentially cause condensation inside our walls if we're not careful. So normal construction, we're usually prioritizing heating our buildings. So a normal construction situation would look like this. We've got a warm house, cold outside sometimes. So if we look at a wall detail, the warm air from inside could potentially get through that wall, and if it cools on the outside of the wall, within the wall, that's where the condensation happens. That's where that surface of your water glass happens, inside your wall, and you just end up with a pool of water that gradually builds up, and it can't escape nearly as easily as that air vapor can get in, or the water vapor can get in. So we stop that in the building industry with adding a vapor barrier, something that stops air from transferring into your wall. Then we keep the moist air in the warm area, and we stop it from condensing inside our wall. But a cold room is different, because a cold room is cold on the inside. We're trying to keep the heat out in a big way. It could be 39 degrees in our cold room, and it could be 100 degrees outside. That's a big difference in temperature. And on a humid, muggy day, that air could travel into our wall in the same way as before. It could come in from outside, and then once it gets into that inner surface, if we allow it that far, it could condense there and create a pool of water and gradually build up, and just you end up with a bunch of soaking insulation. But we can stop that with the vapor barrier there as well. But I wish it was that simple. Unfortunately, that only applies to one situation where we've got warmer outside air and cooler air inside our cooler. Sometimes if you're building a cold room that you want to keep outdoors, say in Tennessee, and in winter it gets far less than 38 degrees, then you also have to consider what would happen if your cooler was warmer than the outdoor air. Then we have to treat it like a regular building. We have to put the vapor barrier on both sides. And the simplest solution I can recommend for this that solves this problem, rather than having a bunch of plastic everywhere trapping moisture inside your wall, is to just use XPS, like extruded polystyrene insulation. It's closed cell, doesn't allow water vapor to travel in either direction. It's just easy. As much as I would hate to recommend styrofoam for stuff, it really solves this problem, stopping condensation inside your walls. Okay, so there's the 3 mistakes that I hope that helped you avoid in the making of your cold room. Temperature control. So now we've got our cold room built by whatever technique, wherever you wanted it, and now it's time for the precision. And this is getting us a little bit closer to carrot independence, because if we don't have precision, it doesn't matter. If we have a pit in the ground, and sometimes that pit gets up to sometimes I revert to metric. Sometimes if that pit ever gets up to 70 degrees for a couple days, it's like all your carrots are spoiled. Nice try. Try again next year. It's not like fix it tomorrow. You can't try harder and fix your vegetable supply. It's just you lose it. So temperature control is a big deal. We've got our cold room. Let's see how we can control this temperature. The heat is always coming in. The first solution I came across was the air conditioner pumping out heat. How many of you have heard of this? Using a CoolBot to use an air conditioner. Cool. Not as many as I thought. Okay, so I'm glad I'm sharing this first. I've got a solution I like, also like an alternative to this in a second. But one of the simplest ideas is to take your window air conditioner, common window air conditioner, stick it in your cold room, and get it to pump the heat out, just like it would pump the heat out of your house. You can put it on the inside of your house. Like you could pump it into your house if you wanted to, or you could pump it outdoors. Either way will serve the job of making your cold room the right temperature. But there's a problem. Regular air conditioners, first of all, are not all compatible with this. So the CoolBot has popularized this technique, and on their website you'll find two resources that are great. One is a list of compatible air conditioners. So just go to their website, look up air conditioner compatibility. You get a list of ones that will make sure that the one you buy is going to work with this control technique that I'm going to show you. And then you can also get a size calculation there so that you make sure your air conditioner matches the right size of your cold room. So I did that. I got my air conditioner installed in the side of my wall there in my walk-in cooler, but how do we control this air conditioner? Because the problem with the air conditioners is that the lowest temperature they're set to by factory standards is 63 degrees Fahrenheit. That's not cold enough for any vegetables that I want to store. I need to get it down to 38, 39. So we need to override some controls with this air conditioner. And we can do that with the CoolBot. So that's one option. You can buy a CoolBot for $374 US. It works. I used this first, and then I realized after a couple of years of using this, hey, all this CoolBot's doing is telling my air conditioner or it's tricking my air conditioner to turn on at a lower temperature than it would normally turn on. It just uses a little heater probe to do that, and I can make my own little heater probe. So I did this solution instead. I bought two Inkbird temperature controllers. This solution cost me $50. And now these two controllers work as a team in conjunction with a light bulb as my little heat probe, and that tricks the air conditioner to turning on just the same way that the CoolBot would. And the parts for this are in the handout that I'll give you too, so you don't have to stress about it. And I've got a video here that'll explain.
This is, I assure you, just a standard window air conditioner. It looks normal, but we've pulled that front grill off, and we're going to make a couple of modifications to this air conditioner, because even though it's totally powerful enough to cool this small room down to our refrigerator temperature of 4 degrees usually, they're all programmed to go down to a minimum of 17 degrees Celsius, which is, yeah, it's fine for a cool room, but not for this room. So we need to override that control system in order to get our desired temperature. So what we look for behind this back panel is this little temperature sensor. This is what's telling the air conditioner when it's time to turn on and off. We need to intervene with this sensor so that it thinks it's warmer in this room than it actually is. And the way we do that is by adding a little bit of heat right on top of this sensor so that we trick it into thinking it's warmer. And a light bulb is the perfect tool for that. So we've got a light bulb up here. I'm just going to tuck the sensor in. And our thermostat right now is telling the light bulb to turn on because the room is too warm. And that light bulb will tell the sensor that it's too warm in here also, and the air conditioner will turn on as a result. Now, I've unplugged the air conditioner right now just so it's a little quieter in here, but that's what would be happening. So this temperature controller and light bulb can do the entire job of controlling the air conditioner, telling it when to turn on and when to turn off. We just need one extra precaution in the use of the air conditioner to make sure that the system runs flawlessly, and that is an extra backup temperature controller to cut power to this system here whenever the fins on the front here start to ice up, because these fins will be operating at times below freezing, and if we don't intervene, moisture in the air will freeze on these fins and prevent airflow, and then the whole thing gets frozen solid and airflow stops and your cooling power gets lost entirely. So we can't afford that kind of failure. So we've got an extra sensor here attached to this temperature controller, and this temperature controller is set to 1 degree. So whenever these fins get below 1 degree Celsius, so they're just about to freeze, we cut the power to this system, the light bulb turns off, and the air conditioner goes back into just fan mode instead of cooling mode, and the system is allowed to defrost while the fins warm up again. When they get back to a more acceptable temperature above 1 degree Celsius, the system can turn on again and the air conditioner can resume cooling the air in the room. So that's the system. 2 temperature controllers, 1 light bulb, a clever repositioning of the sensor, and you're set to cool your walk-in cooler with a window air conditioner.
Okay, so that's all it takes, really. And some of you might have thought, oh, I can do this. And some of you are also probably thinking, oh, there's a lot of wires on that wall. I don't know what, I don't know about this. And if you're then in group B there, just send me an email after. I'll send you a video clip and you can watch it again and see, or I'll explain it. I've got this written out in text as well, so you could have confidence that you're hooking it up right. It's really the same two functions are performed by these Inkbird controllers as the $374 CoolBot. Exact same system. I used the CoolBot for 3 years. Then I sold that to a guy who didn't want to use this system, and I switched it to this, and I've been doing this for 7 years, and it still works the same way. So that's as much as I can say to back that up. There's also independent research, my last point here, that has tested this method. Don't have to bother about reading the tiny stuff, but a group did an evaluation of this method of using a window air conditioner to cool a cold room, and because it's obviously not how it's designed to be used, but they couldn't find any signs of extreme wear, any signs that it would not last as long as it would as a regular window air conditioner. So it's kind of been approved for use in this context. And this link to this study, it's got graphs and stuff if you like that. It's in the workbook as well. Oh, we're moving right along. Okay, storage zones. Because now we know how to control the temperature. I thought I had it made at this point. I had my cooler, I had my cold temperature. I get it down to 39 degrees. And now I thought all I needed to do was put my boxes of vegetables in there. So I thought, okay, I'm going to have my prized carrots. Now I can walk into my cold room. I'm going to do the things that I know. I know I have to do a couple things. I know that if I just set carrots out on the counter, they dry up and shrivel and get all rubbery and stuff. So I know I have to pack them up. And that's addressing the problem of transpiration. All plants do this. It's just the process of their moist insides drying out eventually. That water, that H2O, is going to transfer through their carrot wall, the carrot walls, to the outdoors, and it's going to dry out eventually. And it happens even after the carrot is harvested. And we can stop transpiration or extremely slow it down if we control the relative humidity and the temperature. Both have a really high impact on the rate of transpiration. Humidity needs to be high, so if we keep our humidity high, we can slow that transfer of water vapor out to the air. So I increase the humidity by just adding a container around my carrot. That was the switch there, yeah. This carrot has no container. This carrot has a container, so we increase the humidity. And then we also decrease the temperature as quickly as possible to preserve as much of that moisture inside the carrot. So humidity's up past 90%, temperature's down below or around 38 degrees Fahrenheit. So that's what I thought I needed. So I took my prized carrots, loaded them in these blue bins. This is just my washing station. I'm drying out the carrots after I've sprayed them and everything. Put them in a bin with the lid on and tucked them in my cooler, and I thought everything was good. Then what happened? Come back even days, for sure weeks later, and my carrots are all shiny again. This didn't make sense because the week prior, when I was at my my washing station here, I just blow dried all my carrots to make sure they were totally dry because I knew moisture was the enemy with storage. But still, a week later, in my box, somehow the carrots got wet. I didn't add water, they got wet. That was a mystery until I did a little more digging. I obviously don't want wet carrots. Wet conditions in storage anytime leads to rot, so I don't want any wet conditions. And I discovered that there's this process of living things. We're doing it right now. It's respiration. We're breathing. And the carrots that I harvested and put in my cooler were still alive. The cells are still functioning, living cells. So they're taking in oxygen, giving off carbon dioxide, and they're giving off water. So even though I put in dry carrots, I can take out wet carrots despite not having done anything else to that system. Water will be released from the carrots slowly over time. So I have to account for this in my storage strategies. Do all crops respire? Yes, my cabbage respires, my potatoes, my onions, my broccoli, it all happens at different rates, and it affects how we store crops and how we manage their moisture, but it's happening to all of our vegetables even after we pick them. So the way I handled my respiration with carrots, first it was I thought, I need to give them a bit more breathability. So I tried these porous sacks. These are polypropylene sacks, which are great for they're great for some things. Often animal feed will come in these. These are potatoes for these because they're great for regulating moisture a little bit. So I tried these, first of all. Even multiple layers, under tarps, in combination with the various different things. And my carrots got shriveled up again too fast. So that didn't work. My next attempt was holes. I thought, I can't give them quite as much breathability, but what if I just pop a few holes under the edges of the bin? So you can see in that picture, hopefully, there's 3 holes, about 3/8 of an inch each on the end of the bin. I've got them under each handle of the Rubbermaid bins that I use. And it turns out that was just enough to allow enough of this moisture to get out so that when I opened the bin again, I didn't have wet carrots anymore. But I did have something else. So there's a bin. So all of our crops, if they need a high level of humidity, they're just stored in Rubbermaid bins. People ask me all the time, isn't that dangerous? It's plastic. And the plastic danger comes when you use these bins at high temperatures. So as long as you're using them in your cold room, the safety checks out. Okay, the next problem I had was condensation. It turned up in my bins as well. It's the same idea here. I've got moist air inside our cold room, inside our carrot boxes, and it was showing up again. Even though I dealt with this respiration problem, I would still open the lid and there'd be moisture on the lid. Now it wasn't on the carrots, but it was still on the lid. So I needed to handle this somehow. Eventually it could dry out, but in the meantime, if this was happening on my lids, it was dripping down on the carrots and causing little rotting spots wherever the moisture was dripping on my carrot box. So I needed to remedy this. And the answer I knew, it was not to put them in a sack like this and just let them all dry out. Then I just have soft carrots. Nobody likes a soft carrot, as they say. But the solution, the first thing I tried was burlap sacks. That worked, but they smelled a bit and they didn't wash very well. Then I tried t-shirts, other fabrics. And the thing I've settled on is just this jute, natural jute mat. It's used for growing microgreens. It works beautifully for this. It absorbs so much moisture and so much humidity from that air, and I just lay this on the top of my carrots. It slowly goes down with the bin as the number of carrots decreases inside the box, floats on the top, and if anything drips on the mat, just soaks it up, and it gradually wicks, or allows that moisture to dissipate through those holes. So all this moisture regulation is happening right inside each one of these plastic bins. I can make adjustments throughout the winter if I need to, depending on how it's looking, but that's the basic gist of it. Sorry? How deep do I stack the carrots? Within a couple inches, as you see here, it's nice to leave 2 or 3 inches at least on the top, so you got some from the bottom. Our carrot bins they're not the full-size Rubbermaid bins, they're the medium size, and they're I think 15 or 16 inches high, so the stack of carrots would be about 12 inches at least, yeah. Yeah, so now we've got carrots in June, and they're harvested from last October. Yes, sir? Yeah. Good. So the question was, a lot of people don't wash their carrots to store them in. Then there's also the recommendation that you should dig them out, not wash them, but bury them in sand. Have any of you heard that? Yeah. Yeah, I tried that once. And it's not, maybe if I would have more committed to that method, I would have eventually had better results. But that method led to some really soft carrots. And also, it's like, why am I doing this? Why am I digging out my carrots so I can bury them again, so I can dig them out again? And then now there's sand on all my carrots. I can't just stick them in my mouth. I want to just harvest something, clean it once, put it in my cold storage room, and then go down to the cold storage room and grab it and stick it in my mouth. That's the easy way. And maybe the sand thing worked for people 100 years ago when they didn't have technology that could control the temperature. But this seems like the easier pathway. To answer your question, should I bury? Yeah, and whether you wash them dirty or clean, that was the other part of the question. If I don't wash them immediately, they're incredibly hard to clean. If I keep them moist throughout the harvesting process, and I'll even, if I'm harvesting a big bed of carrots, and I can't wash them all within 15 minutes, then I'll be watering them with just keeping the carrots moist as I'm harvesting them as well, so the soil never dries on the carrot. As soon as it dries, then it stains the carrot and it becomes infinitely harder to get off. And if I store them for months before, then you're scrubbing them with a brush in your sink. So the way I do it now, I can wash them all really quickly. And they stay clean like this, until June, like I said. So information about how you can store all the fruits and vegetables, it can be found easily online, and two of these documents are are this one, the commercial storage of fruits and vegetables in florist and nursery stocks. This is a 796-page document. It's a great read, as you can tell by the cover art. It's very entertaining. And then that's a USDA publication, and there's a Canadian one that's only 50 pages. I don't know how the Canadians managed to condense all that valuable information to 50 pages, but somehow it's out there. They have the same cover artist, but anyways, I thought, as I was reading this material, there are patterns here. I don't have to list every single vegetable and the unique situations that it needs to be stored properly. There are really only 6 storage zones that I'm using over and over again, and if I group my vegetables into these 6 zones, then I don't have to think of 30 different zones. I can just think of 6 zones, and it's easier to explain and easier to follow my own instructions myself. So the 6 storage zones are this: room temperature. Lots of things can be stored at room temperature for quite an amount of time. We're not going to talk about those today. Moderately cool and dry. Cucumbers, oh no, sorry. Forget I said the word cucumbers there. Cool and very humid, that would be a cucumber category. But we're going to talk about the cold and dry, the cold and humid, and cold and very humid sections. These are the zones that we control within our cold room. They're all cold, but we vary the amount of humidity. So the first zone, cold and dry. Temperature is 4 degrees or 39 degrees Fahrenheit. Humidity is ideally less than 70%. Sometimes our cold room creeps up higher than 70%, but we still have great results with our onion crop in this category. So we want lots of ventilation around our onions. I like to string my onions together, so my photo is the picture on the left, but you can also store them in crates or big mesh sacks like that, as long as you allow lots of airflow. And yeah. There's their first category, cold and dry. Onions are pretty much the only one that we keep in that category. Potatoes would fall into this next one, cold and humid. Temperature is the same. We could store potatoes, we could store onions colder, but grouping these temperatures into the same level allows us to set our cooler for the same temperature for everything, and it still works. The change here is that we're increasing the humidity. So we're increasing the humidity around our potatoes by starting to use these sacks to keep that humidity around them. That allows breathability, and we don't have any condensation problems at all. And potatoes they've got, if I have a fingerling variety, I'll generally use multiple layers of those sacks to slow down the drying process. Cold and very humid is the last one. This is the one we use for most of our crops that are in the cold room. 39 degrees Fahrenheit. Humidity is now greater than 90%, and to maintain that level of high humidity, we need to get them in bins now. So this is beets, carrots, parsnips as some basics that are going to last you through the winter. And we're always using this absorbent cloth to start with, especially. We're also using those holes in their bins to allow that excess moisture to escape. We're stopping any moisture from condensing and dripping back down on top of our crops as well. And all of these things can last easily 6 months plus. And we're also using the same conditions to store cabbage, broccoli, lettuce as some examples here. Anything but that could extend to radishes, yeah, all greens. Yeah, same conditions. Don't need to add anything there. Yeah.
You wash those greens and stuff and then dry them before you.
Wash the greens. Yeah, the salad greens I'll wash and dry. I grow a lot of greens under cover, so often, if it's just for our family, they'll probably be totally clean, and I'll just put them in straight. The washing, if I'm dealing with a large batch of greens, helps most of all for cooling something really fast. So if I just put a bunch of fluffy greens in a box in the cooler, it takes a longer time to cool down than if I dunk it in water, and then, yeah. Good question. Yeah. Okay, so there's our cold room. Loaded with, another question? Sorry. Yep. Potatoes I don't wash. Potatoes is the one that we don't wash. Yeah, their skins get damaged, and then our storage life decreases with potatoes. So we don't want to wash potatoes. Beets, totally, yeah, they can handle it. Yep. And by wash, I mean we're just spraying with a spray gun. I found this kind of medium powered pressure washer that does a wonderful job on carrots, parsnips, beets, and use just a fraction of the water as well. So there's our storage. There are 3 storage zones right here in this room. And we're controlling the different levels of humidity based on how we're hanging things. Like the onions are drier. We've got potatoes in white sacks. You can't see them in this photo. And then all the high humidity stuff is in the blue bins. We're just checking on that from time to time. Oh, I like this section. Okay, efficiency upgrades. I thought I had everything at this point, but there's a failure yet to come. I'm so close to carrot independence. And really, I have carrot independence, but I don't have carrot independence with comfort, and I'm a first-class Canadian, so I want like comfort with my long-term storage of carrots. So there was a flaw in my system. When I started building our cold room, we had an unfinished basement, so it had exposed concrete walls. They just wick the heat out of your basement pretty well. So our basement was always cold, and I thought, well, we're usually heating our house, so it makes sense to pump the heat from our cold room into the living space in our basement. For the first 3 years before we got into finishing our basement, I didn't notice a thing. It was great. It made our basement a little bit warmer. But then we insulated our basement. We got a little further along with our home renovations, and our basement became really uncomfortable in summer when it was plus 90 degrees outside. Our cooler's running all the time, making sure to keep the cold room cold, and then our basement got 90 degrees as well. So that was not fun. So there's nothing like a little discomfort to motivate a human to make a change, and the change was in order here. I thought, well, how could I not use this air conditioner anymore? Well, I could just ventilate the cold room outside by putting in some fans there on the left. But that only works if the air temperature outside is colder than the cold room, so I can bring in colder air. So I still use this in our winters, and you could pull it off in the coldest part of your winter, but it's still not something you could really count on here in Tennessee. So I needed another alternative, and I thought, okay, what if I could pull a lesson from the permaculture way of thinking and figure out a place to put this heat. It's not that the heat is the problem, it's just that it's not going to the place where I want the heat. I just don't want it in my basement. I want it in my hot water heater. Yeah, that would be a good place. We're using hot water all the time. If only there was a way I could get that hot air into my hot water, and it turns out there is. So I started exploring this idea of using an air-to-water heat pump. This is a technology it's totally available on the market already. In fact, your air conditioners, if you have any air conditioner at home, it's a heat pump. It's just an air-to-air heat pump. It transfers the heat from your air inside to your air outside. What an air-to-water heat pump does is transfer the heat from your air inside to a liquid, in this case water, and then we can use that hot water for something instead of just heating the living space. So I thought, okay, I've got cold air, let's run some cold water into our house. It's coming into our basement all the time. What if I just took the coldest water from my hot water heater, ran into that air-to-water heat pump, and then back to my hot water storage tank all the time, so I just keep my hot water tank as hot as I can all the time, pulling that heat from my cold room where I want it to be cold. And I just would need a thermostat there, that little T, to tell that heat pump when to turn on. So if it was 45 degrees in my cooler, I want it to be colder, so I'd have to turn on the heat pump a little bit more heat into the hot water heater. And then whenever I wanted to use hot water in my laundry, sinks, showers, I would have it ready to go. But I thought, well, sometimes if it's winter, the cold room's going to be cold a little bit more naturally. I might not have enough energy to pull out of that cold room. I don't know what the numbers are going to look like here yet. So I'm going to add a tankless water heater to top up the temperature. So if my hot water tank isn't quite warm enough, then the tankless water heater can just top up the temperature so it's still really comfortable for a shower, laundry, or something, whatever we're using it for. So that was the theory. And so I started by crunching some numbers. Like, how much energy could I surely, is there enough energy in that air inside my cold room to heat water? Because water takes a lot more energy to warm up. So I went back to my data that I had about those R20 walls, that minimum data we looked at earlier, and I thought, okay, if this is going to take 170 watts of energy constantly to pump, I have to remove this 170 watts from my little cold box all the time. How much energy would that be for an entire year? And that brings us to a total of about 1,400 kilowatt hours of energy that I need to be taking out of my cold room over the course of the entire year. Is that significant? How much would this cost to do with an air conditioner? How much energy would it take? Let's compare these two. So an air conditioner, if we use an air conditioner to remove this amount of heat from our cold room, it's just going to pump that heat wherever you direct it. It could be into your house, probably outside. And it's going to have a harder time working outside too if it's plus 90 degrees outside. And that air conditioner is going to need 700 kilowatt hours a year to perform this function. And it uses less energy than what it moves, which is one of the amazing features of a heat pump. It can move more energy than it uses to do that task. But it has a coefficient of performance of 2.0. A heat pump, the one that we use, has a coefficient of performance of 3.0, which means it uses a third of the energy that it can move, or less energy than the air conditioner. Basically, it moves more energy. It does the same work with less energy, which is a good thing. Yeah, I should have said that first. But the biggest gain is that it's not just putting that energy out into space. Where's it going? It's my showers, to my laundry. It's doing something else that I was already having to pay for. I used to have to pay for water heater separately. Now my heat from my cold room is going into my water heater, and then I don't need to have my water heater on all the time. I'm just topping it up, like I said, with my little tankless heater that occasionally runs. So that was the theory still. That was enough, though, to convince me to buy one of these things. This is the Sandin CO2 heat pump. Air-to-water heat pump. I love that this uses water as the exchange medium, or not the exchange medium, but it transfers the heat to water. Some of them still require glycol or something, like an antifreeze material. But the fact that I could plumb this directly to my water heater was awesome. So I put this into my cold room, plumbed it to my water heater there in the bottom, and my tankless water heater is at the top there that I'm touching. It's just a little guy that tops up the temperature if we need. And that's the entire system. Now, there are some great benefits here for using the air-to-water heat pump, in that the biggest one is that we get that coefficient of performance of putting 1 kilowatt in and moving 3 kilowatts of energy out into my hot water heater. So we have that coefficient of performance of 3.0. And this graph shows that at 40 degrees. So this is a graph showing how the coefficient of performance changes with temperature. So with the outside temperature, well, yeah. So at 40 degrees, we can count on it, which is our cooler temperature, roughly. It's always running at 3.0 coefficient of performance. But there's a problem that can happen. If we allow our hot water to get too hot, then our heat pump just can't keep transferring more energy to that hot water because it needs a temperature difference to transfer that energy. So if we don't use hot water, then the system starts to break down. We need to keep using the hot water in order for that tank to cool down, and then it can transfer more energy to it. Does that make sense at all? Can I see some nods? I see some nods. Okay, good. So we need to, if we're not taking showers or while doing laundry in a day, we need to exhaust this heat somehow still. We could put it into a swimming pool, hot tub, maybe it would end up being a hot tub. We could use it for some in-floor heating, perhaps. These are just ideas. This is one that I'm going to do in the coming years. Right now, we're just exhausting it. I've got a couple of controllers that do this for me. They just turn on a sprinkler in our yard. So instead of turning on the sprinkler myself, whenever we have too much hot water, it just bursts a little bit of water out. And it usually ends up turning on for 30 seconds, then just taking a break for a few hours if our hot water tank is topped up enough with heat. And I control this with just automated valve and aquastat. And when I was doing a rehearsal of this presentation, I called these two little devices my best friends, and then my wife made fun of me, so I won't do that again, but I kind of just did. But they're my best friends because they perform really important jobs for me. They stop, before I had them set up here, I would have to like, oh, my tank's too hot, I gotta turn on the sprinkler. But these two guys do this for me now. This aquastat on the bottom measures the temperature at the bottom of my tank. If the bottom of my tank is too warm, it gives power to that automated valve, and the valve just opens and lets out the heat. So they're my best friends because they save me time. They just automate this process. Every time the tank is too hot, it sprinkles a bit of water on my lawn. Tank temperature drops back down to a manageable level. And I don't even think about it. I haven't thought about it since the day I installed that.
Is it spraying, what is that, 45 C, 140 Fahrenheit water on your friend is dangerous?
Yeah. No, I hear you, and I thought the same thing. Like, I thought, man, this seems, am I going to burn my kids when I'm watering? And every time I go up to the hose, the nozzle, it's not hot. So at some point along the path of the hose to get to the spray nozzle, or the path through the air, the evaporative cooling in the air, it's not hot by the time it gets to my skin. So good question. I'm glad I could reassure you there. But yeah, I had the same doubts. And my thermostat cuts in also before that point. It's not 140 degrees before my thermostat turns on. My thermostat will turn on more in the 110 range, 100 range. Yeah. So it's more like just even if it was the actual temperature, it would just be like a lukewarm shower. So now I've got the exposure to the benefits. I'm seeing that the energy is coming from our cold room and it's going into our hot water tank. And I'm starting to think, this is a good idea, but it sure was expensive. I wonder if we could run some numbers and see, like, is this going to pay us back ever, or are we actually never going to save money on this? Was this just like one hit we're going to take for the environment? It's going to cost us a bit more, and we'll live more sustainably, but so be it. So I thought, let's compare it to the cost of owning a refrigerator. Because right now, our family doesn't have a refrigerator. We gave up a refrigerator. So we just have a walk-in cold room and put everything in there. So a typical refrigerator could be $2,000. You could buy a $5,000 one if you want. You could buy one for $500, but let's just say it's $2,000. Then annual cost of operating a refrigerator, this is based on our power costs and where I'm from, so your numbers could look a little different. The annual cost of running in that refrigerator would be $118 for the year. Then if we go over and look at the alternative, if we didn't invest any money on the refrigerator, just went all in with a heat pump, built a cold room. Let's allow $2,000 to build a room and insulate it. Let's allow our sand and heat pump costs $4,444 to get to our door, shipping included. Yours will be cheaper in the States because it's from the States. I used my old water tank, so my cost for building the cold room with this method was about $600 or $6,500, $6,400. But I did some calculations to figure out, actually had an energy meter plugged into some of these devices to figure out how much energy we were saving. And the actual savings a year, we're spending $277 less on energy to refrigerate our food and heat our water combined. Those two costs combined, we're saving $277. Oh, there's I included this in case someone asks me a question about how I calculated those. So if you want to see this, come up and we can talk numbers after. So then I thought, okay, let's see how this would line up year after year. So we've got typical refrigerator on the left, the walk-in cooler with a heat pump costs on the right. Really expensive at the start, but after year 6, we see that the typical refrigerator cost is going up. The other one's coming down because we're saving a bit of money every year. And by year 12, the costs are the same. So we've made back all the difference in money that we've spent on our walk-in cooler. By year 25, we've spent $5,000 cooling our food with just a stand-up refrigerator, and our walk-in cooler has paid us back because we've saved so much in energy doing 2 tasks with one solution. So, yeah, it's more expensive. If I tell a lot of people about this possible solution, you could glaze over and think, oh, I'm just going to write this off because it's too much of a big investment right off the start. And sure, you can just go the air conditioner route and control your temperature really well with that. It works. It's going to use a bit more energy than the integrated heat pump stuff, but I wanted to run these numbers across your eyeballs just so you think about it twice. So now I've got the efficiency as part of our game as well. I'm really proud to be here today to talk to you about this and share these answers with you. And we're still eating our carrots today that we harvested last year from October. The heat that we're pulling out of those carrots, or the walls around those carrots, is going into the baths that our children take and the laundry that we do, and that feels good. Okay, so that brings us to the end. Thanks so much for your attention.